On June 17th, 2019, less than 3 months after US President Trump recognized Israel's sovereignty over the Golan Heights, Prime Minister Netanyahu announced the establishment of a new community in the northern Golan Heights called Ramat Trump. In English means, quote-unquote, Trump Heights.
In the early evening sunshine, the Israeli Prime Minister and the US Ambassador unveiled what had hardly been a secret. In golden font, they inaugurated Trump Heights, a planned new settlement in the occupied Golan Heights. For now, at least, it's just a sign, but for Benjamin Netanyahu, an important symbol.
The Golan was and will always be an integral part of our country. The Golan is Israeli. It's important to stress this again and again.
There are many reasons why Netanyahu did that. The gesture was also in appreciation, Netanyahu said, for Trump's decision to move U.S. Embassy in Israel to Jerusalem and for withdrawing from the 2015 Iranian nuclear deal. At that time, guys, Netanyahu and Trump, they were the best buddies possible and the world has ever seen. I mean, can you imagine Donald Trump giving Israel entire community for free to Israel? You can have it, no problem, nobody's gonna bother you. Can you imagine if Israel was being undone by US and US gave some part of Israel to Syria and then Donald Trump to Syria, like, yeah, you can have it. How Israel will react? Oh my God, they will freak out. But that's exactly what Trump did with Israel. Take this community, this is all yours. You don't have to pay. We will provide security, we'll provide you money and bombs and all of those things. Just have it for free. Of course, Netanyahu was happy for that. Fast forward 6 years, Gulf state leaders currently hosting Trump, as we know, have offered to honor him with what? Qatar is set to gift him a $400 million aircraft referred to as the quote-unquote palace in the sky. They also plan to invest $243 billion in the U.S. economy, which includes the largest deal ever to acquire $96 billion worth of Boeing planes, part of a larger $1.2 trillion investment in Qatari intentions for the U.S.
And this is the story breaking right now. President Trump's extraordinary trip to Saudi Arabia. He is at a state dinner right now. You can bet that it is very elaborate based on what we saw in terms of his welcome as he begins his 4-day swing through the Middle East. The goal on this stop, $1 trillion of investment in the U.S. by the Saudis. So far, they have locked in $600 billion in terms of the commitment from Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman to invest in everything from defense to infrastructure for AI, a really big part of this trip as well. MBS has suggested that they will get to that $1 trillion mark.
The list goes on. Saudi Arabia has pledged to invest $6 billion in U.S. initiatives and has formalized a $142 billion arms deal with the U.S. In addition, the United Arab Emirates has promised to invest over $1 trillion in the American economy. So what does it all mean? I mean, I'm not saying that the Gulf states, they bought Donald Trump, they bought America with their money, and they have replaced the Zionist lobby for good. I'm not saying that, but this is actually, it is where it is heading. According to Jerusalem Post, they have reported when Donald Trump was making all of these investment deals, they said while Israel expressed its appreciation with a small windswept community named after Donald Trump, Ramat Trump, the Gulf states are lavishing Trump with hundreds of millions in gifts, not to mention business deals worth billions to his family and associates and hundreds of billions in investment into the U.S. economy. Israel, in other words, according to Jerusalem Post and Israeli media, this is Israeli media, Israel stands no chance in competing with these Gulf states' humongous investments in U.S. economy. And they have said this is this is deeply uneven playing field for Israel, and if Israel is worried about the ramifications, well, let it worry, end quote. This, after all, is in America's interest. And what is America's interest? Keeping Saudi happy.
Mohammed, you sleep at night? How do you sleep? Huh? Just thinking. What a job. He tosses and turns like some of us. Tosses and turns all night. How do I make it even better all night? It's the ones that don't toss and turn. They're the ones that will never take you to the promised land, won't they? But you have done some job. True. But critics doubted that it was possible what you've done. But over the past 8 years, Saudi Arabia...
Then they have said, this Israeli media, that Israel cannot compete against Gulf states. Against that financial backdrop, Israel simply cannot compete. Is there anything Trump liked about Netanyahu in recent time? Almost nothing, except for one. What is that? Well, Trump was likely pleased to hear that Netanyahu floated the idea this week in the Knesset Foreign Affairs and Defense Committee of beginning to wean Israel off $3.8 billion in annual U.S. military aid, part of the current 10-year Memorandum of Understanding set to expire in 2028. But compared with the hundreds of billions now flowing into the U.S. from the Gulf states, that $4 billion is mere a pittance. In other words, according to Israeli media, this bombshell, the relationship between Trump and Netanyahu is over. Do I believe that to be true? Not 100%, but it did dent a lot into the relationship between Trump and Netanyahu, but it did not, obviously. I don't buy the narrative that somehow U.S. is cutting ties with Israel or that things will change dramatically. No. U.S. is still going to help Israel, and they're going to continue to do so until the end of the day. Let's talk about Iran issue. For the White House, each of these issues seem to be viewed through an economic prism. The cost of striking Iran's nuclear program weighed against the fallout a retaliatory strike on Saudi and UAE oil fields may have on the U.S. economy. The financial cost of an extended bombing campaign against the Houthis, the benefit of easing sanctions on Syria as a way of repaying Saudi Arabia and UAE for their economic largesse. This marks a shift in U.S. emphasis in the region. U.S., in other words, guys, no longer cares about Iran's nuclear program the way they did. I'm not saying they don't care and they're done with Iran. No, not at all. Even though we know Qatar Amir, he requested Trump not to strike Iran, and according to some other reports, he actually convinced him, hey, Trump, don't do this, don't strike Iran because the whole region will be unstable. And looks like Trump agreed to a extent, and I think that as long as Trump is in power and after this Gulf visit, they are not going to strike Iran anytime soon. This marks a shift in U.S. emphasis in the region. American policy in the Middle East was once a balancing act, sometimes better, sometimes worse, between interest and values. Now, the scale has tipped heavily towards interest and increasingly economic ones. And this is not a good news for Israel because, after all, Israel is a taker, not a giver at all. Let me know what you think, guys. What is happening in the Middle East? Is it going to be absolute disaster for Israel? Would they even last? Would they even exist? Subscribe, share that with me in the comment section. I will see you in the next video.